Look at this photograph. 5 individuals, 4 dogs, early 1900s. The photograph is sepia-toned, aged. The edges are worn and rounded, typical of postcards from this era. Let me describe what we're seeing. 5 people stand in a line, facing the camera. They're holding what appear to be hunting tools, long poles, implements made of wood and rope. 4 dogs are positioned at their feet, held by makeshift leashes. The people are dressed minimally, cloth wrapped around their waists. Some are shirtless. Their posture is upright, deliberate. Behind them, wooden planks suggest a structure, perhaps a fence or building exterior. In the bottom left corner, there's a number, 239. Not a name, a catalog number. This photograph has survived over a century. It's been preserved, digitized, circulated, but the names of the people in it, those didn't survive at all. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, photography became a tool for something very specific. Not just documentation, classification. Colonial powers, anthropologists, missionaries, and commercial photographers traveled extensively, taking pictures of indigenous peoples around the world. The stated purpose was scientific, to create visual records of primitive cultures before they disappeared, to study physical characteristics, traditional practices, tools, clothing, to build archives that future researchers could reference. But here's what's crucial to understand. These photographs weren't taken for the people in them. They were taken about them. The subjects weren't individuals with names and stories. They were examples of a type. Indigenous hunter, Philippines. Native warrior, East Africa. Tribal group, Dutch East Indies. The photographs were filed, numbered, and circulated as anthropological specimens, not portraits, specimens. This particular photograph has another layer. Notice the rounded corners, the numbering system, the format. This was likely a commercial postcard. In the early 1900s, there was a booming market for exotic postcards showing indigenous peoples in colonial territories. Europeans and Americans collected them, sent them to friends, filed them in albums. The postcards were sold in sets, like trading cards. Each one featured people from colonized regions, often staged to look authentic or primitive. The photographers worked with commercial companies. They travel to colonies, take hundreds of photographs, and sell them to postcard publishers. The people being photographed rarely, if ever, saw the final images. They had no idea their faces would be sold in European cities. No idea they'd become collectibles. No idea they'd be reduced to inventory. And crucially, they were never identified. Because the postcards weren't about them. They were about what they represented. A category, a type, a colonial fantasy of the primitive other. But let's talk about how these images were organized. Colonial archives, anthropological collections, and museum databases filed photographs like this one systematically, by location, Dutch East Indies, British Malaya, German East Africa, by supposed race or tribe, categories invented or misapplied by colonial administrators, by activity, hunting, ritual, domestic life, but not by individual names. The archival systems weren't designed to preserve identity. They were designed to classify groups. You could look up hunters, Philippines, circa 1910, and find dozens of photographs, but you couldn't look up the actual people in those photographs because the system never cared who they were, only what they were. The number 239 in the corner of this image, that's an inventory marker. Item 239 in someone's collection, not person 239, just item. Let's look at the photograph again. This is not a candid shot. The positioning is too deliberate, the spacing too even. The dogs are all visible, arranged neatly at the front. The tools are displayed prominently. Everyone is facing the camera directly. This was staged. Someone, likely the photographer, arranged these people and asked them to hold certain poses. Stand in a line, hold your tools, keep the dog still. The goal was to create a clear, readable image, something that could be reproduced on a postcard and understood instantly by a European audience as native hunters. But here's what's important. The staging doesn't mean the people were passive. Look at their faces. They're looking directly at the camera. Their expressions aren't subservient or confused. They're aware, present. Some look serious. One appears almost defiant. These aren't people being secretly documented. These are people who know they're being photographed. They're participating, whether willingly or under coercion, we don't know, but they're not unaware. Here's where it gets difficult. This photograph exists in multiple archives. It's been digitized, cataloged, made accessible to researchers. But when you look up the metadata, the information attached to the image, you find location, possibly Philippines or Indonesia, based on similar collections. Approximate date, 1900 to 1920, based on photographic techniques and clothing. Subject, indigenous hunters with dogs. Catalog number, 239. And that's it. No names, no specific village or community, no follow-up documentation, no record of what happened to these people after the photograph was taken. You can trace the photograph through its archive history. You can see when it was acquired by a museum, when it was digitized, when it was published in anthropological texts. But you cannot trace the people. They entered the photographic record, and then they disappeared from it. This wasn't accidental. Colonial photography operated under a specific logic. The goal was to document types, categories of people that fit into racial and cultural classifications invented by European anthropologists. Individual identity was considered irrelevant. In fact, it was sometimes seen as a distraction. If you named someone, you individualized them, and individualization complicated the project of classification. It was more useful to have generic examples. This is what a hunter from this region looks like. Not, this is Joao, who lives in this village and has 3 children. The first statement supports a system of categorization. The second creates empathy, specificity, humanity. Colonial archives wanted the first, not the second. So names were deliberately omitted, or if they were recorded, they were filed separately from the photographs and later lost. The result is the same. The image remains. The identity does not. There's a term for this, the colonial gaze. It refers to the way colonizers looked at colonized peoples, not as individuals, but as subjects to be studied, managed, and controlled. Photography was a key tool of this gaze. It allowed colonizers to capture, categorize, and circulate images of people they considered primitive or exotic. The camera became a way to assert power. The photographer decided who to photograph, how to pose them, what to emphasize. The subjects had little to no control over how they were represented, and crucially, they rarely saw the final images. They didn't know how they'd be framed, captioned, or interpreted by audiences thousands of miles away. This photograph is a product of that system. The people in it were looked at, not seen, documented, not known, cataloged, not remembered. But here's what the photograph also shows, something the system didn't intend. These people are looking back, not down, not away, directly at the camera. One man in the center holds his tool almost casually, his expression unreadable but steady. Another on the left looks slightly skeptical. The youngest on the right seems curious. These aren't people who don't understand what's happening. These are people who are aware they're being photographed, who are choosing, within whatever constraints they faced, how to present themselves. The colonial archive wanted passivity. It wanted
authentic primitiveness. But the people in this photograph aren't giving that. They're present. They're looking back. And that complicates the narrative the photograph was supposed to tell.
Let's trace the photograph's journey. It was taken sometime between 1900 and 1920, likely by a European or American photographer working in a colonial territory. It was printed as a postcard, probably one of hundreds in a commercial series. Those postcards were sold in European cities, purchased by collectors, sent through the mail. Some ended up in private albums. Others were donated to museums or universities decades later when families cleared out estates. Eventually, this image was digitized. It's now accessible online in colonial photography databases and anthropological archives. Researchers can view it, download it, reference it in papers about colonial representation. The photograph has had a long, traceable life. But the people in it? We don't know if they ever saw this image. We don't know how long they lived after it was taken. We don't know if they had families who might recognize them. We don't know if their descendants even know this photograph exists. The photograph traveled the world. The people never left the archive's label. At this point, identifying these individuals is nearly impossible. There's no metadata connecting them to specific names or communities. The location is approximate at best, possibly the Philippines, possibly Indonesia, possibly somewhere else in Southeast Asia. Even if researchers narrowed down the region, they'd still face the problem of time. Over a century has passed. Oral histories fade. Community records from that era are sparse or were destroyed during colonial occupation. And crucially, the people in this photograph might not have wanted to be identified in a colonial archive. Being photographed by colonial authorities often meant surveillance, control, or exploitation. Some communities actively resisted documentation. So even if descendants exist, they might not have any desire to reclaim an image that was taken as part of a system designed to dehumanize their ancestors. The gap isn't just archival, it's ethical. Now, imagine if this photograph had been captioned differently. Not indigenous hunters circa 1910, but Tomas, age 34, from village name, skilled fisherman and father of 4, photographed during colonial occupation 1912. Or 5 men from community name, documented without consent as part of a commercial postcard series. Their families were later displaced by colonial land seizures. A caption like that would change everything. It would restore identity. It would acknowledge context. It would make clear that these weren't just types. They were people with names, lives, histories. But that's not the caption this photograph has. Instead, it has a number and a vague geographic label, because the system that created it never intended to preserve their humanity, only to catalog their appearance. Let me be direct about what this is. It's not just poor record-keeping, it's violence. Not physical violence, but epistemic violence, the violence of being rendered unknowable. These people existed. They lived full lives. They had names, relationships, skills, histories. But the photographic system that documented them deliberately stripped all of that away. It reduced them to visual data, and then it discarded everything else. That's not preservation, that's erasure with a camera. And the fact that the photograph still circulates today in archives, in academic papers, in digital databases, without their names attached, that's ongoing erasure. We're still using this image the way it was originally intended, as evidence of a type, not as a record of specific people who deserve to be remembered. There's a small detail I want to point out. The dogs. They're clearly important to whoever staged this photograph. All 4 are visible, well-positioned, held carefully. The photographer wanted to show that these were hunters with trained animals. It fits the narrative of traditional indigenous life. But here's what's strange. We can see the dogs clearly. We can see their breeds, their size, their posture. But we can't identify the people holding them. The system preserved enough detail to catalog hunting practices and animal domestication, but not enough to preserve human identity. That tells you everything about the priorities of colonial documentation. Tools, practices, and physical characteristics, important. Names, individuality, personhood, irrelevant. Colonial photography was often justified with a specific claim: we're preserving these cultures before they disappear. Anthropologists genuinely believed they were doing important work, creating visual records of vanishing ways of life. But here's the problem with that framing. It assumes cultures are static, that they're supposed to stay frozen in time. It treats people as museum pieces rather than as living communities that change and adapt. And it ignores the fact that many of these cultures were only disappearing because of colonialism itself. Forced displacement, cultural suppression, economic exploitation. The same systems that claimed to preserve indigenous cultures were actively destroying them. So when we look at photographs like this and read captions like "traditional hunters," we need to ask, traditional according to whom? Staged how and why? And what happened to these people after the photographer left? The archive doesn't answer those questions because it was never designed to. Look at it now, knowing what you know. 5 people, 5 dogs, a staged composition meant to represent indigenous hunters, but also 5 individuals whose names we'll never know. 5 people who looked directly at a camera and left us with their faces, but nothing else. 5 lives reduced to a catalog number. The photograph hasn't changed, but what it means has. It's not just a historical image, it's evidence of a system that valued documentation over dignity, that preserved appearances while erasing identities, that treated people as specimens. And that system didn't end with colonialism. We still see echoes of it today, in how poverty is photographed, in how refugees are documented, in how marginalized communities are represented without being consulted. The camera is still used to catalog people as types, still used to create visual evidence without preserving human stories. This photograph is over 100 years old, but the logic behind it is still very much alive. I can't tell you who these people were. I can't tell you if they consented to this photograph or were coerced. I can't tell you what they thought when the photographer posed them. I can't tell you if they ever saw the postcard their image became. I can't tell you if their descendants know this photograph exists. I can't tell you if they'd want to be identified or if they'd prefer the anonymity. All I can tell you is this: they were photographed, their image was circulated, their identities were erased, and that erasure was intentional. But then, this is the 3rd photograph in this series. The first showed someone who fell out of census records. The second showed children used as evidence in reform photography. This one shows people cataloged as specimens in a colonial archive. Different systems, different mechanisms, same result. People who were documented extensively but never known. Seen by thousands but remembered by none. Preserved in images but erased from history. The photographs remain, the people do not. You might think this is just about the past, old photographs, colonial history, archival gaps, but it's not. Right now, indigenous communities around the world are fighting to reclaim images of their ancestors from colonial archives. They're demanding that museums return photographs, that researchers consult with communities before publishing images, that descendants have control over how their ancestors are represented. Because these aren't just historical artifacts, they're someone's family. And for over a century, those families have had no say in how their ancestors' images were used. This photograph, and thousands like it, are at the center of those struggles. Who owns these images? Who has the right to display them? Who gets to decide how they're interpreted? Those are live questions with real consequences for real people. I can't give you closure. I can't tell you this photograph will someday be reunited with the names it should have carried. I can't promise that the system that created it has been dismantled. What I can do is show you how it worked, how documentation became dehumanization, how preservation became erasure, how a camera captured faces but discarded identities. The photograph exists, the people it shows existed, but the connection between them, that was severed deliberately, and it may never be repaired. 5 people, 4 dogs, 1 number, 0 names. This is what it looks like when documentation erases instead of preserves, when a photograph outlives the identities it was supposed to capture, when people become types and types become inventory. The image remains, the people do not. Next time, another photograph, another system, another way of being seen but never known.